If you'd asked me 2 weeks ago, I thought this was just going to be a story about people riding their bikes 140 miles across the Utah desert to raise money for cancer research. And while the story is still about that and their friends and family members who support them in that craziness, when the day was over, it ended up being about so much more than just that. Let me back up a little bit. That's my sister Neva. 3 years ago, she was diagnosed with breast cancer. She received her treatments at the Huntsman Cancer Institute in Salt Lake City. Shortly after her last treatment was over, she decided to ride her bike in an event called the Huntsman 140, where cyclists ride from Delta, Utah to the steps of the Huntsman in Salt Lake. A few of us family members were able to provide support for her during that day. As I watched her make the miles melt away beneath her, one pedal stroke at a time, I decided she should never have to do that again on her own. Sure, there were other riders doing the same thing she was, but except for the first few miles at the beginning, we never really saw them again. We had supported her while she was receiving cancer treatments. It made sense to me to support her in this, too. So the next year, another sister, Louise, and I joined Neva in the Huntsman 140. That's me, Laura. Neva was awesome and coached us through it. Together, we were able to complete 110 miles. We had even more support and family members than the year before. Look at them all. Aren't they awesome? Doing something for 2 years makes it a tradition, right? So this year, even more people decided to join. Besides Neva, Louise, and me, my other sister Ellen and my brother Rio decided they'd do it too. More than just supporting Neva now, we were also going to ride in memory of our sister Sandra, who passed away from breast cancer earlier this year. That's how Team Sandra was formed. And remembering the thoughts I'd had when I'd watched Neva that first year, our team motto became, because no one should have to fight alone. We were talking not just about doing the Huntsman 140, but also about anyone's battle with cancer. 3 more people joined our team. My nephew James, he's Ellen's son, my brother-in-law Jeff, Louise's husband, and a family friend, Rachel. Besides writing in honor of our sister Sandra, we are also writing in honor of James's father-in-law, Salvador, who has stage 4 cancer right now. That's him. Handsome devil, isn't he? With 8 of us riding on that course that day, I know we all have our own stories. This is just one version, mine. It was the same course we'd seen before. Delta to Lindell is about 25 miles. Halfway to that point, we stopped to remember people who have fought or are fighting cancer. There are way too many names here. Cancer sucks. Just before we got to this point, I managed to snap the chain on my bike. Because let's face it, if something weird is going to happen, it's going to happen to me. I thought the day was going to be over for me, or at least until I could get it replaced at the lunch break. But James and Neva are awesome. Using a chain repair kit and a spare link Neva just happened to have on hand, they managed to fix it good enough for me to get back on and ride. I kept trying to tell them they needed to just keep going and I'd figure it out on my own, but they insisted on staying with me. Remember our team motto about not fighting alone? They demonstrated it for me right then. They sacrificed precious time they had planned on using for themselves to make good time. Not only that, they then let me tag along with them, and the 3 of us took turns drafting and pulling to get us to the next pit stop in Lindell, then off to Silver Springs. It's a Category 3 climb to Silver Springs. I don't know all the calculations that go into determining biking climb categories, but I do know that that was not easy. In fact, one guy climbed onto our own little train and drafted behind us for part of the way. There it is again about not fighting alone. I didn't know him, but he needed help to get there, and we were able to provide that for him. Then Eureka, which isn't an official rest stop on the ride, but deserves its own shout-out because getting there requires the strength of Hercules. The elevation is 6,700 feet, and it's a steady climb from Silver Springs to Eureka. I saw Louise and Jeff climbing that mountain, and couldn't have been more impressed. Louise, more than any of us, was determined to finish every single mile. 2/3 of the way up that climb, my chain stopped working again, of course. A sag support vehicle stopped and couldn't fix it. He told me that the only way to fix it was to take it to the lunch stop. To me, that was unacceptable. That meant I'd be missing out on the 30-mile portion of the ride that I had to skip last year because of time constraints. Ellen knew how disappointed I was, and she offered to let me ride her bike from the rest stop in Alberta to the lunch break in Saratoga Springs. But first, she wanted to do the next 9 miles from Eureka to Alberta. It's all downhill and is a lot of fun to do on a bike. That's her and Rachel taking off. After that, Ellen gave me her bike to use to get to Saratoga Springs. She's a lot taller than I am, so I adjusted it the best I could. The road we were on is a narrow 2-lane highway, so she and her daughter Talina stayed in a car right behind me, providing protection from cars who may not have been aware of me otherwise. See how our team motto keeps coming back? Not only did Ellen lend me her bike, but she wanted to make sure I was taken care of out on the course, too. It was a good thing because ultimately, not having my own bike was causing some old injuries to come back, so I wasn't able to complete the entire 30-mile stretch that I wanted to. From Saratoga Springs, the course goes down a very busy Redwood Road and into the Jordan Valley. Neva, James, and Rio did that portion together. By then, my bike was fixed, so I hopped back on and joined them for the next break. Then it's only 8 or so miles to the Huntsman. If it wasn't for James and Neva, I wouldn't have been able to make that last mile. It's all up a huge hill past the University of Utah. I used the camera on my bike to record that last mile, and it's ugly. You can hear me saying things that I know I shouldn't be saying, like, I can't, and how much further? Neva told James to pull in front of me so I could focus on him. He encouraged me from in front, and Neva stayed behind me, telling me how great I was doing. You can do it! You got this! You're doing it! She kept saying. Corley and Christina stayed with us too, hollering cheers and encouragement from their car. Finally, we made it. Ellen crossed the finish line, then Rachel, then Rio was there, and our team was almost complete. We got word, though, that Louise was still out on the course. Jeff was with her, along with 2 of her sons and their families. Ellen went back in a car to check on her and called us with an update. Knowing how close she was, as many of us could piled back into our cars and went back onto the course to cheer Louise on. And this is where the story becomes more than just a blow-by-blow account of 140 miles across that Utah desert. This is when everyone on Team Sandra demonstrated that no one should have to fight alone. That's Greg, Talina's husband. Louise's sons Don and Jared both helped out too. There were at least 6 cars of Team Sandra members on that road, all for Louise. Josie and Neva took turns. I even tried to do my part. I wasn't as fast as I would have liked, but I did my best. No one was going to deny Louise this victory. She had more determination than anyone that day. But no matter how much someone wants something, some days that's just not enough. Some days you need help from other people. So when that brutal hill started, we all helped. Some pushed and some cheered. Right then it didn't matter how many miles had been biked or who had done the most miles, who had driven a car versus ridden a bike. The only thing that mattered was that Louise finished. Which she did. We all achieved personal milestones that day. For some it was completing the entire 140 miles. For others it was climbing Eureka or Silver Springs or making it across that hellish rolling hills part parallel to Utah Lake.
The best. You can be the King Kong banging on your chest.
You can beat the world, you can beat the war. You can talk to God, go banging on his door.
You can throw your hands up, you can beat the clock. You can move a mountain, you can break rocks.
You can be a master, don't wait for luck. Dedicate yourself and you gon' find yourself
standing in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
And the world's gonna know your name.
So, that's our story this year. What about it? Are you ready to join us next year and see what you can achieve?
In the Hall of Fame. Yeah. And the world's gonna know your name.
Yeah.
'Cause you burn with the brightest flame.
Yeah.
And the world's gonna know your name.
Yeah.
And you'll be on the walls of the Hall of Fame. You can go the distance, you can run the mile. You can walk straight through hell with a smile.
You could be the hero, you can get the gold. Breaking all the records they thought never could be broke.
Yeah, do it for your people, do it for your pride. Are you ever gonna know if you never even try?
Do it for your country, do it for your name.
'Cause there's gonna be a day when you're standing in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
And the world's gonna know your name. us. Be believers, be leaders, be astronauts, be champions, be truth seekers. Be students, be teachers, be politicians, be preachers. Be believers, be leaders, be astronauts, be champions.